Okay, welcome to the first learning module. So this learning module is focused on what is anthropology, what is cultural anthropology, how do we think and conduct ourselves as anthropologists in this field. So the learning objectives here, know what anthropology is. One of the most critical things that I need you to get out of this learning module is this concept of cultural relativism. So cultural relativism is what your writing assignment is for this learning module, so make sure that you do this. It's the idea that I can't look at another culture and judge it based on my own cultural standards. It's completely nonsensical to say what is appropriate behavior based on my concepts from my culture of what appropriate behavior is. It's not anthropological. As anthropologists, when we travel and we study other cultures, we have to be able to say, okay, what's right or wrong? What's appropriate? What's ethical? What's moral within this culture that we are looking at? That's the only way that you can properly judge behavior. Of course, there is such a thing as absolute cultural relativism, which can be very dangerous. So, for instance, if genocide is considered moral and appropriate in a certain culture, well, that's still not okay. So we draw the line basically at human rights. Human rights cannot be violated. So rape, for instance, is never acceptable. That is a violation of human rights. Even if it is a cultural norm, we can still, as anthropologists and as human beings, say this is inappropriate, this is wrong. Murder, all of these, abuse, these are things that violate people's human rights. And so, if you're using absolute cultural relativism, you can look at the Holocaust and from an absolute cultural relativistic viewpoint say, well, within Nazi Germany that was appropriate, and we all know, no, it's one of the worst atrocities that ever occurred on this planet. So there is a danger to absolute cultural relativism, and you have to know where to draw that line, and we draw it at human rights. So that's one of the really quintessential elements that I need you to get out of this first learning module, because as we move through the course, you're going to be looking at different cultures and looking at different concepts, and you have to be able to do this in a relativistic manner. So make sure that you're comfortable with that. I'm going to introduce some other paradigms and theories. So a paradigm is essentially a worldview, or an anthropological view. It's a mindset. So when you're living within a paradigm, that's the way you think, it's the way you behave, it's the way you live. And so there are different paradigms within cultural anthropology over the years. Modern paradigms primarily include modernism and postmodernism. And so your textbook walks you through this a little bit, and the PowerPoint files do too, which is why I always make both of those, requirements to look at. So the way that I've set this up is I have 3 lectures here. So lecture 1 is just an intro to cultural anthropology. So as you look at this, what are these different fields in anthropology? Well, I already told you I'm a biological anthropologist. That's me. Excavating a grave. It's not the most appropriate picture ever, but I was at a field school in Spain, and that was culturally appropriate there. It's kind of not, but that's another situation. Archaeology, I actually teach an archaeology field school through Buff State, and so this is me at Old Fort Niagara, and this is a French drain from one of the earliest occupations at Old Fort Niagara that we excavated. You can see it's about 8 feet down. And so archaeology is another way to look at human culture through material remains from the past. And then we also study culture through linguistics. So this is just walking you through that. Here's what cultural anthropology is, and so these slides will take you through that. I also, in these different PowerPoints, I try to have personal elements, right? Because if you're a kinesthetic learner, you learn through stories and situations. And so this is actually me in Guatemala. I'm living during this period in the highlands of Guatemala, and I was talking to these kids. We were trading words. So I speak English and a little tiny bit of Spanish. They speak Spanish, and then an indigenous language called Mam. These are Mayan children. And so they were teaching me through both of our understandings of Spanish. I was teaching them words in English, and they were teaching me words in Mam. And so I've got pictures in here from this trip, sort of scattered throughout. So that's, when you see pictures of me, that's what's going on. So take a look at this. Anytime I put tables, those might be important, hint, hint. This Paradigms and Theories lecture, it's just sort of, I like these PowerPoints because they're just bullet point lists for you to study from and learn from. These, cultural relativism is important. That's why I pointed it out already, and you have a writing assignment on it and all of that. But these are just ideas to familiarize yourself with. You don't have to like engross yourself in them. Today's leading paradigms, again, are modernist and postmodernist. You should know, am a postmodernist. There is no absolute truth. There is no right, like absolutely only one right answer. And so that's the idea of postmodernism, and that's how most anthropologists sort of work nowadays. This third lecture is, how to be a cultural anthropologist. So what do you do when you have field work? This is me on that same trip. We actually went to talk to people about domestic violence, and to just learn about this culture that really domestic violence is quite common in Guatemala. And so to talk to men and women in rural and urban areas about this and all of that. So there's this big plan, and there were a number of us there to do this. It was a team project. And yet here I am building a chicken coop. So when you are working as an anthropologist, it doesn't always go according to plan. You don't say, I'm going to be there for 3 weeks, and this is what I'm going to accomplish on day 1 and day 2 and day 3. It doesn't work like that. It just doesn't. So did we plan on building a chicken coop? No. Here I am in my hiking boots and a skirt and all of this stuff because, things things don't go according to plan is lesson number 1 of field work. And so we talk about different methods of field work. This same trip, this is a friend of mine, this was our bathroom. So you have to realize that things are not going to be the same when you travel elsewhere. And you have to decide what you're willing to accept and what you're not. So that there's a giant hole in the wall in terms of privacy. Some people might be like, oh, that makes me uncomfortable. But in terms of safety, that may be a line for some people. I'm not willing to, pull my pants down and sit on a toilet in a room that's not secure in a strange place, right? So am I safe? Were we safe here? Absolutely, we were. But might some people have been too uncomfortable with that? Sure, and you have to know where your own lines are. And so culture shock is a major issue when you're working in the field. Here we are, all of the women in our team working with women, talking about our daily lives, and how we carry out different practices. So this is walking you through analysis and methodology and all of that. So do familiarize yourself with these, but don't forget to read the book chapters, because they're going to talk you through the details of those things. So then you've got to make sure that you read this 100% American article by Linton. It's super duper short. And then do the writing assignment. Make sure you participate in the discussions at the appropriate times. And then when the quiz opens, you can take the quiz. Remember, the quiz is available for 4 days, Friday to Monday. So stay on top of that. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions, and pay attention to the dates. Make sure you check in here at a regular basis. All right.